Right, so welcome and hello to How to Cope with Change. This is going to be an interactive session and it will last approximately 35 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And I like to make my sessions interactive because I like you to be able to apply the learning there and then. So I will ask questions, there's some self-reflection exercises for you to do as well, and I'll ask you to share your responses in the Q&A, and I'll read some of them out, or sorry, share them in the chat. I'll read some of them out. And the reason why I do this is because often when you're going through a particular challenge or situation, it can feel as if you're on your own. But when women come together and they share what it is that they're going through, it then makes you think, well, I'm not alone in this. There are others that are going through it as well. And by sharing our experiences, we can learn from each other as well. And that helps to resolve some of the issues and the fears that we may have about the changes that we're going through. So how to cope with change? Now, at the moment, a lot of organizations are going through big change. And if your organization has indicated that jobs may be at risk, or that in the future there may be risk to jobs, can you just put a comment in the chat, just say yes, that you're currently going through a situation where your organization is likely to be making job losses or going through some change. Right, we've got quite a few yeses here. Yes, 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 yes. They haven't said as much, but they have hinted. Already made redundant on the 31st of March. Oh, sorry to hear that, Nicola. Well, hopefully what I'm going to share with you today, if you're going through change or you're likely to be going through change, will help you to cope with that change. Oh, we've got another one, yes to change, but no to job losses. And we've got some more yeses as well. Right, so you're in the right place then, because that is what I'm going to be talking about, how you cope with the change. Got another one, was already unemployed, so concerned over more redundancies coming. So this session will help you to understand the change process and what you need to do to get through it. It will help you to develop resilience when faced with change and identify the opportunities that exist, because when we're going through change, opportunities are there, but we have to be curious enough to be looking for them. Myself, prior to starting my coaching business, the organization that I worked in, I got 3 of my promotions as a result of organizational change. It will help you to realize the importance of having a career having a career vision, and it will help you to keep yourself marketable so that you future-proof your career. So before we begin, I'll just quickly give a little overview about who I am for those of you that don't know me. So my name is Carol Stewart. I'm known as the coach for high achieving introverted women because I specialize in coaching introverted women who are leaders. I work with all women, but I have a speciality with introverted women. And I help women who feel overlooked and undervalued to raise their visibility and their profile, exude leadership presence, and excel at what they do. And I also work with organisations and their women's networks, their BAME networks, and provide workshops and training, personal development, leadership development, and careers development. For the past 3 years, I've been named a LinkedIn top voice in the UK. And in 2018, I was named a We Are the City Rising Stars champion for the work that I do supporting women in their careers. And these are some of the organisations that I work with or I have worked with. I'm also the author of Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. And this is a guide for introverted women to help them lead as themselves without having to put on a persona or try to be something that they're not. Now, in 2017, the Chartered Institute for Personal Development stated that all organisations are in a state of flux, changing their focus, expanding or contracting their activities, and rethinking their products and services. Most organisations more than 10 years old look nothing like they did even 5 years ago, and it is likely that in the next year or two, organisations will not look as they do today. Now, when they made that statement, little did they know what would have been happening in just a very short space of time. And as a result of this global pandemic, we've seen organisations have been forced to change at the drop of the hat, more or less, because it was all unexpected. And so why change? What are some of the reasons do you think that or why organisations need to change? And if you type in the chat box, I'll read a few comments out. Why do you think organisations need to change? Right, I've got a chat coming through. Cost cutting, cost to stay current, relevant. The world has changed. To stay current, different challenges and business outlooks, technological change, staying up to date, being more inclusive, customer demand, increasing productivity. Yes, and these are all reasons why organisations need to change. So thank you for those. And you've all alluded to these. Costs, technology, advances in technology means there has to be change, changes in legislation, competitors, growth, customer buying behavior changes. There are many reasons, political, why organisations have to change. And when we're in an organisation, sometimes we may not always see the bigger picture because we're focused on our area of the business or our department, our team, ourselves even. We don't always see the bigger picture. A client who has currently was on furlough and has now been made redundant as of yesterday, she couldn't understand why her organisation made her redundant when she was on furlough. And she was sort of adamant that they should have waited until the end of the furlough scheme had ended because it has been extended. But I was trying to help her to see that she may be looking at it from her perspective and not understanding what is going on for the organisation. There is a bigger picture why the organisation is having to do that. They may be in financial difficulties. They may be not able to run as a viable business anymore, in which case it means that there would be no job for her to go back to, in which case, under the furlough scheme, organisations are not meant to have people on the scheme if there is no job for them to go back to. So sometimes we don't always see the bigger picture. And since the 20th of May, we've had a number of big organisations that have announced job losses or threats to job loss. We've seen Rolls-Royce, some names that have been around for years, Debenhams, EasyJet, lots of radio stations that may disappear. And this is only since the 20th of May that these ones have been announced. There was more before, and there's likely to be more after. I'll just read a comment here. I also understand the company can use the money from furlough for redundancy payment on the payout, the accumulated leave. Thank you for that, Anneli. And when we're going through change or a threat of job loss, it's been likened to the grief process. So when somebody loses someone and goes through grief, that's what job loss has been likened to. And going through organisational change, there's a range of emotions and feelings that we go through before we get to a place where we accept what has happened and we're able to move on and integrate into a new normal. So we will go through shock. So there'll be initially shock that your job is at threat, you're losing your job. For some people, they then go to a state of denial. It's like, oh, this isn't really happening to me, or they bury their head in the sand, hoping that it will go away. And then they move to frustration. For some people even anger about it. The client I mentioned to you, she is at a place of anger. She's very angry against the organisation. She's worked with them for about 30 years, and the way that they've dealt with it, she's very angry about it. And then you can move to a state of depression or feeling low or losing motivation about it all. And then we start to experiment and look at, well, what are the possibilities and what else could I do? And then we start making some decisions. Well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply for this, or I'm going to retrain. And then once we've got to that, we then move on to integration, and then we start to integrate the new normal, the new way of being. So for those of you who are going through an immediate threat of job loss, or you've got one pending or likely to come up in the future, where do you identify with it on this curve? Can you identify with being on this curve at all? How are you feeling about it? And please share in the chat. Where do you see yourself on this curve? So as I mentioned, my client, she's sort of going up and down. Some people, you can go up and down. So she's angry, but at the same time, she's starting to look at possibilities and experimenting and looking at, well, what else could I do? She's starting to look at retraining and also going into a different industry altogether and trying to identify what are her transferable skills. So I've got some here. So let's have a look what's been put. So yes, frustration and low, but looking at ways forward, starting to come out of the depression stage. I lost my job at Thomas Cook and I went through all of this and now have a totally different career. And that just goes to show that it is possible. Between angry and sad, but also looking for options like this presentation. So thank you very much for sharing those. And so if you identify where it is that you are on the curve, I've got another comment here, I'll just quickly read out. I'm uneasy, I'm still working full time. I worry it's a waiting game until I'm furloughed or made redundant. And another one, the challenge for me is that I have many changes, historical unemployment, a recently failed marriage and a husband who has now left. Thus my change curve moves constantly depending upon each day. And for some people, that's right, you will move up and down the curve depending on what is happening on a day-to-day basis. And the thing is to identify where you're on the curve and think about what it is that you need to do to move yourself further along. So if you're in a state of shock, you know, you've just been told that you're going to be losing your job or the organization is having to restructure and there may be job losses and you may be feeling quite shocked, what do you need to do to move yourself further along the curve? What do you need to do to get yourself to a place where you accept that the change is happening and you're starting to look around and think about what it is that you can do? And if you're able to do that, it'll make the whole process a lot easier for you. And you may feel as if your whole world has been threatened. When you're faced with a job loss or you're faced with redundancy, it's like a threat to your personal survival. You may feel that your survival is at risk. I had a client whose organization was going through a restructure. She was a team manager, and the organization was going to be reducing from 5 managers to 2. And it meant that they all had to reapply for their jobs. And what it would mean that 3 of them would be unsuccessful, their jobs would be made redundant. And so for this particular client, when she came to coaching, she was having sleepless nights, she was stressed, her skin was dry and flaky, her scalp was flaking. And these were the physiological symptoms of the stress that she was under. And I said to her, what was going on for her? And she told me that she thought that she was going to end up homeless. Now, I could see that that was quite an irrational way of thinking. And so I said to her, well, what makes you think that? And she said, well, she's going to mess up at the interview. She won't get the position. If she couldn't get the position, then she'll get made redundant. And then if she gets made redundant, she won't be able to pay her mortgage. Her house will be repossessed and she would be made homeless. So she had gone from being in a job to now thinking she was going to end up on the streets. I've got a comment here that I'll just quickly read out. I think for quite a few at the moment, it's not job loss redundancy, but reorganisation with the company that not reflect where, e.g., I want to go or how I see my role now or in the future. and thank you for that. And what I'm going to be talking about will help you to think about what you can do going forward. And so with this particular client, she was thinking she was going to end up homeless. Her mind had raced ahead. And that is what can happen when we're faced with a situation and we feel it's out of our control, because we like to be in control. We like to know what is around the corner. We like to be in control of our circumstances. And when we aren't and we don't know what's going to happen, it feels like a threat to our sense of personal security. And it can invoke feelings of stress, despair, powerlessness, fear as well, because we can feel helpless if we don't know what is going to happen. We worry about the outcome, as my particular client was doing. And often we imagine the worst possible outcome. Our brains will make us think that the worst is going to happen, rather than looking at things in a more rational way. But the thing is, if a situation is out of your control, accept that there's nothing that you can do about it, but you can control how you react to it. And if you can control how you react to it, that will help you to feel a lot more in control, and it will be less stressful as well. So acknowledge how you're feeling, acknowledge those feelings, whether it's fear, whether it's stress, whether it's worry about how you're going to pay your bills or how you're going to put food on the table. Acknowledge and accept how you feel, but don't dwell in those feelings. Because we're very much led by our emotions, and the way that we think affects how we feel, and we act and behave according to how we're feeling. And so if we're thinking the worst is going to happen, and we start to believe that the worst is going to happen, then that's going to make us more stressed. That's going to affect our ability to think rationally. And the client that I mentioned, whose job was at threat, the manager, she was thinking she was going to end up homeless. And so I said to her, okay then, so just supposing the worst was to happen, what could you do? And she thought about it, and she said, well, I guess I could look for something else. I've got years of experience. I guess I could get something else. And I said to her, well, just supposing it took you a while for something to happen, what could you do? And she said, well, I guess I could rent out a spare bedroom. I don't really want to do that, but if the worst comes to the worst, I guess I could do that so I could continue to pay my mortgage. And then it was once she realized that she had options, it was like a light bulb moment for her. It was like a light bulb went on for her. And she recognized that she was going to be okay. If she lost her job, she was going to be okay. And once she realized and she recognized and she believed that she was going to be okay, she felt so much more calmer about it. The stress wasn't so heavy for her. And she went into the interview, and because she was feeling more calmer, she was more confident, and she got the job. And she came to me after and she said, Carol, she said, people kept saying to me, don't worry, you're really good at what you do. You'll nail it. You'll walk it. And she said that the more people kept saying that to her, the worse she felt. And she asked me why that was. And I said, it's because you didn't believe it. Until you believed that you were going to be okay, you didn't feel okay. And you know, if you remember what I said about we're very much led by our emotions, and it's because we have a belief about ourselves and our circumstances that causes us to feel that way. So when you're feeling worried and anxious, that is going to affect how you act and behave. And it will either make you feel, because you're so anxious and stressed, that you're not going to perform to the best of your ability, or you won't do what it is that you need to do to enable yourself to move forward. And the thing that you can do to help you adapt to a situation like that is by challenging your thoughts and beliefs about your situation and what it is that you can do going forward. And it's something that you have to practice doing on a regular basis until you get to a place where you can, when you start to feel anxious or when you start to fret or feel fearful, that you can rationalize your thoughts and beliefs so that you don't have that feeling of anxiety. And to help you adapt, it's to think more optimistically about the future, about your situation, about what your options are, and about what you can do to move yourself forward. So I've got a little exercise for you, and I want you to think about any anxieties that you've got about the current or future changes. And I want you to describe the change. So if you've got a pen and paper, if you write it down, and what is it about the change that makes you anxious or afraid? And what could you lose as a result of this change? And I'll give you about half a minute to just think about these questions and write them down, and then share some of your thoughts in the chat, and I will read some out. Right, I've got a couple of responses that I will read out. And you may want to, if you've not had time to really think about it, you may want to reflect on these questions after. So let's have a look. Company partnership, make my role redundant, struggle to find my job to keep up the mortgage, relationship breakup, alone forever, a loss of belonging, identity, company. Eventually getting on public transport to work, getting COVID and bringing it back home to a vulnerable adult who would not cope and could possibly die. Dad has Alzheimer's. I know we will lose him and that makes me very scared. Also, workplace is changing and I've been there for 15 years and finding it difficult and out of comfort zone. Also, menopausal body so changing. Going back to old routines, missing social gatherings, losing the ability to interact and go out. Pregnant, children. So there's lots of different experiences that people are going through and have identified what it is that they could lose as a result. And if you remember what I said, that we're very much led by our emotions, and the way that we think affects how we feel, and we act and behave according to how we're feeling. And if we can change our thoughts and beliefs about ourselves and our situations, that will change how we feel. So thank you for sharing. I'm not going to be able to read out everybody's, but thank you for sharing. Now, I want you to think about what you've just shared with me and what you've come up with. And I want you to think about potential opportunities to look forward to in the changes. And what is it about the change that you could be excited about and look forward to? And what could you gain as a result? So giving the example of the client who was on furlough and has been made redundant, she's starting to look at retraining. She's starting to think about going into different industries. She works in the hospitality industry. She recognizes that that industry is going to be affected for a very, very long time. So she's thinking about what industries could she go into. As I mentioned previously, I went through organized before starting my coaching business. I got 3 promotions as a result of organizational change. I've got a comment here. I've always thought I could do well in 2 other careers. This is possibly the best time for me to retrain with the redundancy money. And that is a good way to look at it. Instead of commute more free time to use effectively. Thank you. So if you can look at your situation and look at how you can view it more optimistically, but get curious about what the potential opportunities are. I mean, I know where people have talked about losing loved ones. That is, that, you know, that you may look at that and think, well, there's nothing, no opportunities to look forward to with that. But when it comes to life and understanding the life cycle, understanding that, you know, things happen and there's things which are outside of our control and we can't do anything about it. I mean, this year for me has been an up and down year. Started off the year really, really well. Launched my book on the 31st of January. 3 weeks later, one of my best friends of 32 years died. And that was a really challenging time. And then also straight after that, buried her on the cusp of lockdown, just before lockdown. So at least I was able to go to her funeral. And then you go straight into lockdown. But for me, I have had to accept that, you know, in life, things happen that I have no control over. I could sat and moat about my friend. And the thing was, she was a single mum with a 16-year-old son as well. Or I could have accepted that, you know, that has happened, and look at what I can do to move on, because I know that that is what she would have wanted. So other opportunities here. Opportunity not to go back to the same pre-lockdown routine and have a better routine. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a question here. I've joined a new company right before the pandemic starts. The job is very stressful and I'm not happy with the environment and it's making me anxious. I was blaming the situation of the corona, but then I noticed it isn't because of the environment. I'm very hesitant about quitting my job. I don't want to regret it. Right, if you hang on till the end, and if you ask me the question again at the end, then I will be able to, I'll answer it then. So thank you for that. I'll go to that one at the end. So in every adversity, we can look for opportunities, but we've got to have that curiosity to identify, well, what could be the potential opportunities that could arise as a result of what I'm going through at the moment. And some of you have come up with some great opportunities or ways of thinking differently about the situation that you're currently going through, and how using how lockdown has helped you to see that you don't have to go back to the pre-lockdown routines that you had. You can have better routines. And why do you think it's important to have a vision for your career? And if I could just share what someone has put, it will free their mum up to live her life. And yes, and that is, yes, very much so. So why do you think it is important to have a vision for your career? And please share why you think in the chat. To grow as individuals, to make plans, clarity and focus, don't get stuck in a rut and get bored, to stay focused, goals and purpose, the purpose, thank you for those. And yes, I would agree with all of what you've said. Motivation, to keep up to date, to know where you want to get and what you need to do to stay focused. And thank you for those, yes. And the importance of having a career vision, and not just for your career, for your life as well, because you can't have one without the other. And when you're sort of thinking about what you want for your career, think about what you want for your life as well. You can't really separate the two. And it's essential to finding job satisfaction and success. It serves as a roadmap so that you know where you're going. And if you know what it is that you want or the direction in which you're going, when you get setbacks like a job loss, or you get setbacks about change, if you know where you're going, it's easier for you to pick yourself back up and carry on. So yes, it may be a block at the moment that is going to temporarily throw you off course. But if you know what your vision is and what it is that you want long term for your career and for your life, then it's easier to pick yourself back up. But if you haven't got an idea about what it is that you ultimately want to achieve, what it is that you want, when you get setbacks like job loss or any sort of change, it can be harder for you to pick yourself back up, because you can be wandering around a bit aimlessly because you're not sure about what it is that you want. It helps you to focus on long-term objectives, and it helps to define and maintain your personal direction. And as others have said, it helps to keep you motivated. Now, this isn't me, this is my sister. Most of you probably not have been old enough to remember those early day mobile phones. And hands up, anyone, put in the chat, yes, those of you that do. Yes, we've got a few people here. Yeah, a few of us that remember them. Now, imagine that is one of the early day mobile phones. That phone, what use would that phone have us today? We have our phones now, we can take photos, we can take videos, we can speak to people and see them across the other side of the world. But if phone technology had not moved on and had not made the advances that it had, and we were still using phones like that, we wouldn't be able to do half of the thing, a quarter of the things that we are able to do now. And that's the beauty of adapting and moving on and growing and developing, is that we evolve and we move with the times. And if you think of big brands like some of the brands when I was growing up, like Woolworths or Kodak, even Blockbusters, who were all big brands when I was little growing up, they're no longer around just because they didn't adapt, they didn't move with the times. You think of brands like Google, Apple, Samsung, they're constantly reinventing themselves. Facebook even. Facebook for the past how many years has been sort of at the top when it comes to social media. For those of you that are old enough to remember, was it Friends Reunited? That was one of the early social media platforms. That is no longer around. They didn't invest in the research and development of what Facebook is doing. And I say this is because you need to apply that to yourself. If you think of yourself like a brand, and as time goes on, you need to adapt, you need to develop, you need to reinvent yourself as well, in order for you not to get left behind, in order for you not to be carrying a brick around with you instead of a smartphone. Because the world of work is constantly changing. And I remember when I started work, and I'm using a typewriter. And I bet if I show, say, some of my nephews, or even my great nephew, some of these images, they would think, well, what are they? And so we have to be able to adapt in order to stay relevant. And in order to do that, you need to think about the skills and how you can develop your skills in order to remain marketable, in order to compete in competitive environments. Many people are using the lockdown as a time to develop their skills, because there are a lot of free courses out there, there are a lot of paid courses out there that you can tap into to develop your skills. We Are the City is doing a fantastic thing, providing these types of webinars like what I'm doing. They've got a whole series of different webinars that can help you to upskill yourself, to develop your mindset, to develop your career. So we need to be constantly developing ourselves. If you think of yourself as a business, you are in the business of you. For a business to stay competitive and relevant, They have to be constantly looking at what the changes are in the market, what their customer buying behavior is saying, so that they can stay relevant. And the same applies to you. What can you do so that you stay relevant and you keep yourself marketable? How can you develop your skills? How can you learn new skills? And when we look at 21st century careers, they are changing completely and we're seeing now, we're going through a tremendous change, because the world of work is not going to be the same once we get through lockdown as it was at the beginning of the year. A lot more organizations are going to have their employees working from home. The way that we work straight 9 to 5, that is all under review, in terms of, because people who've had to work from home and homeschool have had to work more flexibly. So there's no need to go back to what it was. Organizations will be looking at, well, how can we do things differently? And we need to be, and you need to be able to move with the times, be adaptable, and identify what it is that you need to do to remain relevant for a 21st century career. And with the frequency in which change is happening, you can't get complacent and need to keep yourself marketable if you are to get ahead. This includes developing your personal brand, your skills, knowledge, and expertise. So we're going to be wrapping it up, and then I will be open up for questions. So pulling it all together, be adaptable to change. There are certain things that we cannot have, we don't have no control over, and it's about accepting and adapting to the changes that come our way. What do you need to do to get through this? What are the opportunities? Being optimistic. Get clear on your career vision and the direction and what it is that you want for both your career and your life. Be optimistic, looking for the opportunities, and keep yourself marketable. So what will you do differently going forward? What will you do differently going forward? Please share in the chat and I'll read some out. What will you do differently going forward? Right, let's have a look what we've got. Be strict about confining work to work hours. Yes, having those boundaries. Look for positives in the situation. Definitely look for the positives in change rather than focus on the negative. Stick to my more organized routine. Look at what internal training my company offers. Be kind to yourself and give yourself time. Look for positives. Look forward to the change, to the responsibility, to the opportunity to make a positive impact instead of dreading all this. I need to get a better career vision and path. Know I am heading instead of flapping about. Thank you for sharing those. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're going to come off this webinar, forget about all what I've said, and 10 is, yeah, I'm really going to do what I said I'm going to do, and I'm confident that I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. Where would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of confidence and motivation? 10, 8, 8, 8, brilliant. 7, 6, 8, 8, fantastic. 7, 10, 7, 7, fantastic. That's brilliant. Reevaluate girls and get your CV updated. Another 10, thank you, that's great. And for those of you that rated yourself below an 8, what I would suggest is to think about what needs to happen to make it an 8. And so thank you everyone for coming on. If you want to stay in touch, that's my website, aboundingsolutions.com. I have a free download on there for those of you who want to be more confident about promoting yourselves online. I have a Facebook group for introverted women that you're welcome to join. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And if any of you are a senior leader or executive on an executive team and you're introverted and you want to join my High Achieving Introverted Senior Women group on LinkedIn, then please connect with me and let me know. And I want to leave you with this quote. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And that's something for you to think about and reflect on. And then before I open up for questions, I'll just tell you about what is coming up next with We Are the City. Their next virtual webinar, Leading in a Crisis, which is tomorrow. You can register for that if you go to the wearethecity.com and you can register for it just like how you registered for this one today. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It's been brilliant. And so remember the session tomorrow if you go to wearethecity.com, and you can sign up for tomorrow's session there, and also find out about all the others that are taking place as well. And thank you, everyone, for coming online. And I hope you apply what you said that you're going to do.